This video has been 2 years in the making. No, that's not because it's how long it's taken me to learn all the rules for that stupid little game, or even remember some of the names of the players. But whilst I didn't find an instant love for rugby league, when you move to Australia, you'll find that this is probably one of the games that you're just gonna fall in love with, that or AFL. And why will you fall in love with this beautiful game, even though you have absolutely no idea what's going on? Well, here are 11 reasons why NRL is gonna become your new favourite sport. Let's face it, when you first move to Australia, you're probably not going to know anyone. You've moved over here perhaps on your own or with your family, and whilst everyone's going to look familiar speaking English, they're going to sound a little bit funny, and you're going to want to be their friend. To watch or be part of rugby league gives you a fantastic community spirit. Now, depending on where you live in Australia, this statement is going to slightly annoy you. But rugby league is a massive part of Australian culture, contrary to what most British people think, and that rugby union is a bit bigger. Well, in Brisbane, where I live, rugby league is a massive part of their culture. Perhaps if you live in Melbourne or further south, maybe AFL is going to be a big part of the culture, despite the fact that Brisbane are better at AFL than them. But this isn't an AFL video, and it's about rugby league. And this says nothing more about community than turning up to a massive stadium in the middle of the city, wearing a completely different jersey to the teams that are actually playing, and still feeling a sense of community just because you want to watch 20 odd huge blokes run around a field chasing a little oval shaped ball. To get in with the Australian community, you're probably going to need to do as the Australians do. And despite rugby league being a minority sport around the rest of the world, and even actually in Australia itself, there are other sports that are more popular apparently, the sheer number of die-hard rugby league fans and their intense passion for the game is going to soon have you acting like some kind of rugby league hooligan, sipping on your beer quietly in the stands. In my opinion, there is nothing better than live sport. And a game day experience watching rugby league does not disappoint. Despite the fact that lots of NRL teams share stadiums, that's probably because the stadiums are quite big and impressive, except if you had to go to Townsville or something. NRL fans are noisy. They have fireworks. Sometimes there's even a little horse running around the stadium. Well, actually not even around, it's running in the stadium. That one got me the first time I saw it. Even if you're not just there to watch the burly men bash each other to see if they can get the ball across the line, there is pretty much something for everyone out of a game day experience. Do you like to watch grown people sweat their tits off, wearing an oversized mascot costume that is slowly cooking them inside? Do you like your favourite teams to lose crushing defeats in their local derbies? Whatever you're there for with regards to the game experience, you know it's a good time when your kids always leave with a smile on their face. When I used to go and watch live sport in the UK, it was normally, that other football that's a bit more popular in the world. But I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a family-friendly atmosphere. Quite often you had lots of young men that had put too much alcohol and other chemicals into their bodies that they probably shouldn't have, to turn the next 90 minutes into some genuine rage fest, where anyone, including the referee that disagreed with their decision, was a You just don't really get that in Australia. Sure, you have a couple of people that are carrying on like a pork chop, but generally speaking, going to an NRL game, even at night, I don't feel unsafe taking my 5-year-old daughter. Even before the games, they have these little rides and things to cater for the children, and they're all free. To be honest, I think my 5-year-old just thinks that that's what NRL games are, and then they have people running around chasing a ball. Even when people casually swear in the stands, because of the beauty of Australian culture, no one really bats an eyelid when there's a fuck or a bugger, or a because it seems like they always just say it on the radio anyway. But Australians do it in a funny way, an acceptable way, a way that's casually disregarded, even in the presence of children, just because you're at a footy game. But Australians are so passionate about engaging with the game, even if they're not allowed to run onto the pitch like they can do in other sports. In NRL, smart people find ways that fans can just take part. At half time, you often have games where people see if they can throw a ball further, kick a ball further, just do things better than other random people out of the stands. Even in Brisbane, once a year, they have 2 children, one from the north, one from the south side. You couldn't get a better rivalry in my opinion. Battling it out over a game called handball, which we didn't really have in England, to see who is better at handing the ball. And then they made a massively oversized trophy just because it's funny. They've got t-shirt cannons, an environmentally wasteful amount of polystyrene things. Quite frankly, if you go to an NRL game and you don't take part in some way in the festivities, the problem is you. Don't be the problem. During live sport in the UK at half time, those 15 minutes are basically spent trying to get another drink, which you have to shove down your neck because you can't drink it in the stands, generally speaking, unless you go to posh rugby union games, and then taking a piss to leak out all of the fluids that you've shoved down your neck so quickly. Unless you support certain teams, I think it's Crystal Palace, or maybe West Ham. The best you could hope for at half-time was a few scantily clad young women performing something that they call cheerleading. Not a bad thing to watch, I guess. But in Australia, the half-time entertainment at an NRL game is pretty epic. It's one good thing that they've taken from the Americans, I guess. And despite what Australians want to believe, they're probably a little bit more American than they want to let on. Sometimes it actually makes you want to stay in your seat at half-time. And it's also supported by the fact that it just seems to be a half-time thing that people go up to get a beer and take a piss. So rather than begrudgingly sitting in your seat like you would at other sports, perhaps in other countries, sit back, watch the show, and then in the first few minutes of the second half, just hope that no one scores and you can quickly nip out for a schooner and a piss. Now, despite what I said earlier about NRL being a complicated sport, the rules are actually pretty simple. You can't pass it forward. You only have a small number of attempts to move the ball forward, and if you keep getting tackled too much, you've got to give the ball over to the other side. Repeat that as many times as you can until you can get your ball over the line at the other end of the pitch. Let's face it, as long as you've followed some other sports around the world, it's going to be pretty similar to what you've previously watched, just with some slight variations. Well, if you've moved to the other side of the world and you've had so many changes in your life that you've probably been successfully able to adapt to, picking up the new rules of another sport aren't going to be that hard, really. It's got the word rugby in it, but it's not really the same as rugby union. And if you've ever watched American football, other than the fact that you can't pass it forward, certain elements are going to seem pretty similar. I'm going to get told off for that, aren't I? Oh, keyboard warriors. Even if you don't fully understand the technicalities, or why some little ding's gone off and they've shouted 6 again, just enjoy the game for what it is and take solace in the fact that every now and again you do understand one of the decisions that's been made, or at least when the ball goes over the line, just cheer. Because let's face it, NRL games are pretty action-packed. Despite the size of some of the geezers that are running around on the pitch, they're pretty light on their feet. And let's face it, what's better than watching 20-odd huge men chase each other in a little ball, and then when they finally catch up to them, trying to pummel them into the ground? And I know there are lots of rules to prevent people from getting hurt, and no one really wants to watch someone else get hurt. But when it does happen, oh, it's bloody good to watch, isn't it? Apart from if it's raining, because when that happens, it's just like no one can catch the ball. But fortunately for Australia, even in the winter, it doesn't rain as often as you'd think. So most of the games are dry, although maybe a little bit cold. So you get to watch your favourite players get smashed in the face by perhaps your not so favourite players. Or maybe the other way around. I had never seen tackles like I had in any sport, perhaps apart from MMA, but they are trying to hurt each other there. Until I started watching NRL. Watching grown men be put on their arse or even put to sleep by other grown men is actually quite entertaining. Maybe it goes back to our ancestral roots, like the Romans and the gladiators. And I'm sure if you asked any seasoned NRL fan, they would be able to tell you stories of their favourite players getting knocked out, injured, and how good the old days were when they didn't really care about players' personal safety. Fortunately or unfortunately, that doesn't really carry on much nowadays. But every now and again, particularly in the big games, you're going to see something magical. And I guess by now you're wondering, how can I be part of this fantastic community of large men who like to hurt each other? Well, of course, you might be able to obscurely watch it, probably through some kind of streaming service online, but it's much better to do it when you're in Australia. And if you want to live here permanently, you're probably going to need a visa. Now, over the last 4 years of making weird videos on my channel, showing my new Australian way of life and promoting how wonderful I generally think it is, I've been able to help thousands of people understand if making a life in Australia could actually be a reality for them. So if you want to see what your visa options moving to Australia are for free, then speak to True Blue Migration Services, mention us and use their free visa assessment. All you need to do is upload your CV or resume onto their website, and sooner than you can watch an NRL game, probably not that soon actually, someone will contact you and tell you what your visa options are. And because we've been able to help so many people do this, if you decide that their service is better than watching Reece Walsh get knocked out during the Origin, then by mentioning us, you can also save $200 off the cost of your visa, which cost-wise would probably be enough to pay for 2 family tickets to an NRL game, and a few beers as well, because you don't actually have to pay for transport to get there. Public transport's free in Australia to all major sporting events. I don't think you get rivalries in any other sport bigger than NRL, apart from apparently this club called Collingwood, but that's on a different shaped pitch. When I first moved here, I didn't understand what state of origin was, or when people just kept referring to it as the Origin. I thought they were talking about my electricity bill. But it doesn't even just stem from what states you're originally from. The rivalries even within local teams are pretty epic too. When you first move to Australia, you have one of two choices. Do you support your local team and watch them lose pathetically for the rest of the season? Or do you sell out and go for one of the bigger teams so that you can undeservedly bask in their glory? So don't be a sellout and just move to a good NRL area. But unfortunately, you never really know what's going to happen in an NRL game. In Australia, everyone loves an underdog. And that, combined with Australians' overwhelming sense to always want to win, you're pretty much guaranteed that in any NRL game, you don't really know who's going to win. At least that's what I'm saying with regards to my tipping ability in the local tavern league, which I have never won or even come close. I think it's got something to do with the fact that people get injured so easily. The human body is incredibly frail, and it doesn't take much to turn the tide quickly into the other team's favour and watch them score try after try again while you sadly sip into your beer. I mean, it doesn't make it even any worse when your daughter supports the other team as well, because she likes dolphins more than horses. Let's face it, some sports, particularly my other type of football with things like the Premier League, it gets a bit boring after a while, when oligarchs just buy out the teams and fill them with the best players. The fact that there is comparatively hardly any money in NRL means that anyone could win at any time because they're fighting for an old-fashioned thing called pride. But let's face it, none of these on their own are going to be the reasons why you're going to find NRL your new favourite sport in Australia. Because even after perhaps one season of following a team, celebrating in their wins and learning to deal with the losses, it's going to help you to create an even deeper emotional connection to your new home. Because when you first move to Australia, that's what we're really looking for. Connection. Not the connection between a 120 kilo person's shoulder and someone else's face, but anything that can drive a deeper and emotional love for the new place that you call home has got to be a good thing. And if you're a tight ass like me, then there is nothing better that can drive home a deeper emotional connection than the financial connection to your wallet. Especially because of the fact that living in the UK, I never found a first grade sport that was so interesting to watch for so little money. You don't even feel bad buying an overpriced beer, knowing that you are probably supporting the club that you love watching and probably want to keep watching as long as you live in Australia. I know people are going to argue with me now about which sports in Australia provide the deeper emotional connection, and I guess I do really need your help to find out what else could be better. So let me know in the comments. If you want some help with your visa, speak to True Blue Migration Services, or find us on Instagram at @JohnstonLife and message us, and we'll see what we can do to help as well. And if you didn't like my take on Australianness, ta-da for now. But if you want to see more of what our life is like in Australia, then watch this video. See you there.